Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
He's in the building!
Drink the moment. Drink it.
I said empty your mind.
Coquettish and coy. Ow. Ow.
What?
There's people that are dying.
The wickedly talented.
More than great. It was historic.
Crack is
Oh, good for you.
I have to apologize.
One of the hottest.
Welcome back to The Reheat, a podcast that re-examines the wildest celebrity news and scandals of yesteryear and asks, how would we react to the same events if they'd transpired today? I'm Sarah Sahagian.
And I'm Sadaf, and we are your hosts. And this week, we have got yet another hot off the press. So let's go through a few quick, juicy headlines first. I need you all to be watching Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. This is not even a headline. This is just me saying I love this show. I need you to get on it. Sarah, have you been watching it all?
I haven't yet. I actually listened to Anne Helen Peterson's Culture Study episode about it. I'm
Perfect.
interested. I'm following the discourse. I need time to watch it. When you have a kid, no one tells you that your reality TV consumption, once you're done nursing, is just going to fall off a cliff. So
I hear you. I will say it's on Disney Plus, so you can fool me by logging into Disney and then going in there.
Like, this is a new Disney show.
Yeah.
Let's watch it. She will be very confused. She's like, wait, what?
Understandably, but this would be a win for you, and I know you would have so much commentary on this. So future episodes, Sarah's going to catch up, and I need you all to catch up because it's delicious. It's almost at Bravo levels is what I will say. Second up, really changing it up here because it's a real slow news week. Hasan Minhaj was spotted at a Sabrina Carpenter concert alone, bobbing his head. Okay, he was not alone. He took his whole team with him, but he went viral for several days because he was like, a grown brown man at a concert of young white teens, bobbing his head in the corner. It was strong uncle energy. But then I also thought, this is amazing. Sabrina Carpenter she's won over everyone. I like that little child. I really enjoy her in her new album.
She's funny. And
She's
I
funny.
think funny respects funny. Hasan Minhaj is funny. She's funny. I get why he'd be a fan.
Good point. Okay. Another fascinating headline that grabbed me this week. Ariana Grande, as part of the Wicked promotion for the upcoming Wicked movie that she stars in, did a cover story with Vanity Fair with co-star Cynthia Erivo. Lots of fascinating stuff came out of there, namely that she denies stealing her man from another woman. And if you are not familiar with what I'm talking about, get familiar, okay? She very definitely won over or took a man who was married to another woman, I believe. Actually, you know what? I don't know if they were married or not, but they were definitely together for some time and they had a fresh baby. And this was kind of the running story for a while, that Ariana's a bit of a man stealer. Now, we don't judge, LOL, but I thought it was really interesting, Sarah.
I thought it was interesting too. And listen, she's not the first person to sort of say, I didn't steal the man. Angelina Jolie did the same. Emotional affairs, however, are a real thing. So I do think that it's possible there was an emotional entanglement. But at the end of the day, it is not illegal to have an affair, and it's not illegal to get divorced. So I hope that the world forgives her for this. I just think that it's interesting that she feels the need to say that it didn't start out as an affair. Even like we've already gone through Angelina Jolie and Jennifer Aniston, and we're still very much in this narrative that men can be stolen. You can't take a man who doesn't want to leave, as Debbie Reynolds famously said about Elizabeth Taylor. And so it's always the man who should be at fault who leaves. If you think that he should have stayed with his wife and his child, that is a totally legitimate thing to say. But he was the one who committed to the marriage.
Completely agreed. Well said. Yes, that SpongeBob SquarePants actor deserves a little comeuppance himself, dare I say. And clearly, I think you all heard, Omar is also not a fan of this. He's not a fan of cheaters. But Sarah's right. In fact, let's talk about some real criminal shit. So, if you haven't already watched Baby Reindeer on Netflix, I really insist you do. It's just an incredible dark comedy. I would say borders more on a drama because it's quite heavy trigger warning. It just picked up a round of Emmys, including for its creator and star Richard Gadd and supporting actress Jessica Gunning. The story generally follows, as long story short as I can give you without spoilers, Richard Gadd plays himself really as a man who works at a bar, and one day a woman shows up at the bar who's played by Jessica and very slowly kind of seems to become a stalker. And then there's a whole other
Mm-hmm.
plot line involving sexual assault with Richard Gadd's character and folks in the acting industry who he was trying to work with. It's really, really fascinating. I don't know if that's the best sell, but it's one of the best things I watched last year on TV. But a lawsuit is in the midst because, again, this is Richard Gadd's story. It's a real
Mm-hmm.
story, he said. Sarah, can you explain a little more?
So here's what happened this week. Here's a little update. A U.S. judge ruled that Fiona Harvey, who is the inspiration for Martha in the show, she's the woman accused of stalking baby reindeer creator Richard Gadd. He ruled that she can pursue a defamation lawsuit against Netflix. And so basically, the judge ruled that because Netflix had billed the show as a true story when it aired, that they didn't make an effort to that it was an issue that they didn't make an effort to fact check God's story or hide Harvey's identity more, right? There
Mm-hmm.
are things you can do when you build something as a true story to either protect the inspiration, protect the people in the source material, or to fact check to make sure that if you're making claims, they are completely 100% true, because you can't just mess around with things that can ruin people's reputations. And so what it seems happened is that Fiona Harvey, engaged in inappropriate behavior. No one is saying
Mm-hmm.
that what she did wasn't inappropriate and wasn't, harmful to Gad. I'm sure it was scary and it was harmful, and that it could be described as stalking, but she was never charged with stalking. She was certainly, she was certainly not charged with stalking. There's no record of that. And there are some other inaccuracies. So this brings up the issue of, when you are playing with real life, like, yes, we are allowed to sort of editorialize in our memoirs and get creative. But when you have a platform like Netflix, and people found out who this woman was really quickly, right? And it has had repercussions with her. Can you play fast and loose with the truth? Because there is a difference between stalking someone and being charged with stalking, right? And yes, you should never engage in even stalking light, but there is a real difference, and that can actually harm people. So I think that Netflix needs to stop doing this. They have a record. I mean, I know they were sued by Rachel Deloche Williams, who felt like she was portrayed incorrectly in Inventing Anna, the story of Anna Delvey. Why does Netflix keep doing this? Why do they keep putting themselves in a situation where they're sort of handing people these lawsuits?
I feel like Netflix doesn't have any ethics anymore. I mean, right down to the content that they generally pump out, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
very basic rom-coms, really terrible television shows. For instance, The Perfect Couple, which came out a few weeks ago. Nicole
Yeah.
Kidman, my queen, why did you do that? It's kind of what they do now, right? They toil in things they know will pick up numbers, and they don't really care about the actual value of it or the content and the quality. They're out there for the money. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think when it comes to things like this, maybe they felt like, I don't know, they're too big to fail. Because one thing that I thought was interesting when that came out this week as well is that, so just FYI for the listeners who are not familiar, Richard Gadd, originally this was a stage play that he had done, and
Mm-hmm.
the stage play had said that it's based on a true story, which is a really simple disclaimer you can use that would probably help you avoid lawsuits like
Mm-hmm.
this. The
Mm-hmm.
Netflix show doesn't have that kind of disclaimer, and I think that's what the judge is also using as the reason why he's going ahead with this. That,
Yeah.
listen, even that would have been simple enough, and maybe they should even add that on now. And I'm kind of like, yeah, why not? Because even though, listen, I've seen the Fiona Harvey interviews. She was doing a whole round of press. Not that that
Yeah.
takes away from her rights at all. Fascinating individual. I think Jessica Gunning did an incredible job
Mm-hmm.
portraying her. They are like clones. But here's the thing, she it's yes, she's exactly how she's represented in the show. That being said, there's always things that are added in just for dramatic value. It's never not going to be the case. So it would be such a simple disclaimer to add. I don't really understand why that's been avoided, and I think unfortunately it's really muddied the waters a little bit for the show. But
I
it's
mean,
still a
Netflix
fantastic
either
piece
needs
of
to
show.
invest in a better legal team of in-house counsel, or they need to listen to them. Maybe they have great people and they're just not listening to them, or maybe they just haven't hired a robust enough legal team. But any lawyer would tell you, just protect yourself. Like, why bother? Why waste your profits on lawsuits? Even if you feel like, oh, we have the money, we have the budget for it, we can pay for lawyers. That's just bad business. You don't have to waste money that you can save money, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's interesting is I always wondered with this show, how did Richard Gadd even sell it? Because the way that it is, and again, you'll see when you go through it, because there's a few people who are really bad people in it, and quite a few people who are represented in ways that I don't know that they would be okay with, and their stories are really put out there, and I felt like this is one of those things where you can smell a new number of lawsuits all around it. But I guess Netflix, again, feels like it's impervious to all of this. Evidently not. Evidently not.
Evidently not. Well, I think it's time for an ad, so we will be right back.
Sounds good.
And we're back. Now, I desperately need to talk about one of my favorite shows, HBO's Industry. So, Sadaf, what is your relationship to Industry? Are you caught up? What have you seen so far?
Okay, everybody's been mad at me about this, I have to say. I am only one season in. I believe it's 3 seasons at this point, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm one season in. Why did I stop? Well, I didn't like anyone. I hated every character. And I know everyone says that was Succession too, but listen, I liked some of the jerks on Succession. I loved them. And I think I struggled with that with Industry and with also some of the lead performances. But I keep hearing you got to stick with it. So I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to get back into it. I need something new and heavy to get into. But Sarah, tell our listeners a little bit about what it's about if they don't already know.
So, Industry is fascinating. I've watched all 3 seasons. At first, it kind of feels like Grey's Anatomy meets high finance.
Ooh.
It takes place at Pure Point, which is kind of like the JP Morgan of the UK. They're doing a lot of investments. They're, working with billionaires, and we are following the incoming class of what they call graduates. So the people who have the starter roles, they've just finished university, or in some cases have not,
Oh.
which is a source of
Oh.
drama.
Of
Uh,
course.
our lead character is Harper, who is originally from the United States but moves to the UK, and you get a sense that she's hiding from something. And then there's Yaz, who is the daughter of a publishing mogul, but she wants to prove herself. I think if I were Yaz, I'd just be a socialite, but that's Yaz. And there are several other characters, some of whom unfortunately are not there anymore. But there's another great character named Rob, who is from a working class background. And his mother always told him growing up, if there's going to continue being an upper class in this country, you're going to be part of it, right? Like, so that kind of critique of there probably shouldn't be a class system, but if there is, you're going to be on top. Uh, so the characters are interesting, and there's a lot of drama. The first 2 seasons feel a lot, and I mean this as a compliment, like a Shonda show. Lena Dunham is the executive producer of Industry famously. She also loves Shonda shows. So I kind of felt like, oh, Lena wanted to create a Shonda show, right? Like the characters kind of feel like early Grey's Anatomy, when they're interns, surgical interns. It feels very similar vibes. But this season, partially because of the writer's strike and HBO didn't have a lot on their slate, they kind of elevated Industry. There was a lot of fanfare surrounding the premiere of season 3, right? And season 3 really anchored HBO's slate for the summer, right? It was, in the prized 9 p.m. Sunday spot. It was something that was sort of billed as appointment TV. Previously, I'd sort of thought of it as soapy, and then it made this sort of HBO kind of made a pitch for it in the marketing as prestige TV. And I actually think it rose to the level of prestige TV this year. So I'm going to tell you why. I think while it started out as kind of like this melodramatic story that also had a lot of like people doing coke and going to parties and having like really wild and crazy sex, all of that is still happening here. But we learn more about the psychology of the characters. So we just had the finale, and I'm so sorry, Sadaf, but I'm gonna spoil it
Go
for you, and I'm
ahead.
gonna
Go
spoil
ahead.
it for our listeners.
Skip
But by the
ahead
time
like
this comes
5
out,
minutes,
you will have had
guys.
time to hear it, to watch it. Here's the thing. I think that it showed us that all of the debauchery from the first couple of seasons is because the characters are broken, but so is the world, and they can't find another way to break free, right? That whatever your position is in capitalism, in some ways, unless you are like a billionaire white male, you are its prisoner. So in the finale, we saw Harper. She's completely evolved into a sociopathic anti-hero, decide to leave the fun she created with Sarah Goldberg's Pectra to go work for this man named Otto, who is basically the devil. In fact, he thinks he's worse than the devil and is proud of this. And she's just going to do short selling. That's all she's going to do. that's going to be her job. And she's decided to embrace her identity as an insider trader. She kind of got in trouble this year with Sarah Goldberg for insider trading. And now she's like, I'm going to do that on purpose. I'm going to go to a workplace where they allow me to just be a criminal. And that's my new identity. So she's doing that. Rob has left Pierpoint to go be a sort of a Silicon Valley salesperson and get venture funding for mushrooms. And Yaz is going to marry Henry. She's going to marry basically Jon Snow from Game of Thrones if he were a modern character, and he's a really bad guy. So what's interesting about that ending is it really shows you how dominant patriarchal capitalism is, right? So I get the impression with two characters like Rob and Harper that while they never were in dire poverty, right? Like these two people came from, I think, lower middle class backgrounds is what is implied. They always had enough to eat, but life was a slog, right? That the only way to escape that slog for Harper is literally to become a really, really rich criminal, right? And do insider trading. And then Rob, who has decided he doesn't want to break the law and doesn't want to do things like that, he will always be slogging. He's going to be slogging at a higher level than his mother, but he's going to be in these Silicon Valley boardrooms begging people for money. He's going to be doing this his entire life, and he can never get to the point where he actually is a viable option for Yaz. And I think the show successfully showed us that Yaz and Rob are the love of each other's lives, that they've been circling around each other. But she also can't be with him because after what happened with her father and that scandal and on the yacht, she needs to be with someone who can protect her. And there was that beautiful scene. I'm going to tell you about this scene, Sadaf, because it was gorgeous.
Please do.
Where Yaz is with her future fiance's uncle, who basically owns all the British newspapers. And he's saying, I have this damning story about you and about how you didn't save your father's life when you could have, when he fell off a yacht.
What?
And if you marry my no good nephew and sort him out, I will protect you. And this man, he presents as so avuncular and sweet. He gives her the speech about how men are trash, where he's like, I was raised by women. My father was abusive to me. Men are trash. I know this. But also, I am the most powerful man in Britain, arguably. And I know men are trash. And if you marry my trash nephew, this is the subtext basically, and help him stop being trash, I will protect you. And so it shows you that in patriarchy, basically the only choice women have is what man to stand behind.
Oh, God.
Like Yaz spends 3 seasons trying to be her own woman, trying to escape her father, who it's now implied sexually abused her as a child, but we know at least physically abused her and sexually abused other women. It's just this piece of trash, right? She grew up with money, but literally no other advantages in life. And the only way she can do it is to find a slightly nicer man to stand behind, right? She makes the choice to choose a new patriarch, right? Like And literally in patriarchy, it's like she chooses a literal patriarch, like a new father figure who tells her, like, young lady, I know your father was trash, and basically says it's okay, you killed him, but I will only protect you if you are part of my family. And so it's kind of similar to Succession, right? Where in the
Yes.
end, Shiv's choice is which man to stand behind. She can't
Literally
have the
just
power for
thinking that.
herself.
Yeah.
And so I think Succession successfully showed us how class and patriarchy are intertwined, and how even people who come from money, like Yaz, unless you are the man in control, are somewhat governed by it and don't have a lot of choice. And people like Rob, he can never achieve social mobility because even though he went to Oxford, he didn't come from a wealthy family, and he will always be hustling, just hustling in Brooks Brothers clothes now. And then Harper, like, I guess she feels free, but the only way she could do that was to completely disregard the law. So I actually think it's a really powerful social commentary about the intractable nature of capitalism and how it oppresses all of us unless you just, like Harper, just don't care about rules or laws or humans.
This is incredible because I actually think you've just given me, of course, endless spoilers, but on top of that, the first best sell to get in back into this show. That sounds so good, and is not what I would have seen coming after season 1. So that's kind of incredible. They did all that in 2 seasons. I have read quite a few raves and people saying it really is a great follow up to Succession, which is fascinating. And those themes that you hit on, wow, it really is fascinating. And I saw that so heavily in Succession. I think it's just so Shakespearean, really. Um, and it's so fascinating that we're seeing it come through these incredibly contemporary dramas now that take place in a cutthroat business world where I really do believe it really is still that way. I doubt that the gender balance exists remotely up there. It doesn't in our industries. We've talked about this. So I don't know. I find that really fascinating, Sarah. I need to watch. We're talking about a yacht murder. We're talking about terrible men, of course, criminals, insider trading. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and what I find interesting, and a question I'm wondering, and I wonder if you have any insights on this, if you have any theories, did they intend for this just to be a soap, and then they kind of accidentally found their way into being a prestige show and realized, oh yeah, we were talking about profound and interesting themes all along? Or was this always the plan, to kind of trick us into thinking it was meaningless and vapid and just for fun, and then wow us in season 3?
I think so, only because I feel like a little bit of an outsider in a good way to this conversation because I watched season 1 a little while back and it was very, very different from what you are describing. And I remember the way that it was kind of generally described too. And it, to me, it felt like more of a Skins in
Yeah.
Skins meets trading. Now we're talking about Succession and all these other great dramas. So I do think you're totally right. I think they suddenly realized people are paying attention. We can do something with this. And when Succession wrapped up, it left the perfect gap for them to step right in. Also, by the way, big bonus points to Lena Dunham. What a win for Lena Dunham. Look at that.
I know. And I feel like no one is mentioning her. And I don't know if that's strategic, if they think that people will misinterpret what kind of show it is if she's attached because she's so associated with girls. But yeah, it's a win.
It's a win. I wonder if people have even forgotten that she's a producer because that was the first reason I watched season 1 because I knew Lena was involved, and now I don't think anyone even remembers. It doesn't seem like a very Lena show now, but I think from what you're saying, the way that it sounds smarter and it sounds like even just the writing is better. Listen, she's a great writer. And I know that a lot of you out there are probably groaning because you're not Lena fans, but me and Sarah are going to be on this ship forever, okay? The woman's a great writer. She knows what she's doing. Sorry.
She does. My one issue with the finale, I will say my one issue, and this is kind of my whole issue with the portrayal of Rishi's wife in general. So Rishi's wife is a podcaster who I guess must be the richest podcaster in the world because Rishi has a huge gambling problem. And for some reason, everyone on the show seems to think Rishi is the worst of them, even though they're all garbage people. And I've never understood why they've decided he's worse than everybody else. Like,
Yeah.
yes, he cheats on his wife when she's pregnant the night before their wedding. Like, bad stuff. He does bad stuff, right? but they all do really abominable things without much reason. And he clearly has a gambling addiction. So I felt like he, in some ways, has the most mitigating factors here for
Yeah.
his bad behavior. And so at one point, she has to bail him out of gambling debt, and she just suddenly has £200,000 saved that she hasn't spent from her media work as a podcaster. So
What?
this woman must be the richest, most successful podcaster in the world, really.
Oh my God.
He married Sarah Koenig of Serial, like, I guess.
Jesus
Anyway,
Christ, that's
the
hilarious.
way she dies, the way they kill this character, who, like, she can be annoying. She virtue signals a lot, but she actually is, in some ways, the only sort of decent person on the show. And she's been through a lot. So they kill her because she and Rishi at this point are separated. She shows up at his birthday, at his apartment for his birthday, and gives him a cake, which is a nice thing to do. She knows he's sick. She knows he has a gambling addiction. And even though he's cheated on her repeatedly and gotten them in debt and done coke on their baby's face, like just all of these. Yeah, well, like, he's doing coke while holding the baby in like a baby carrier, and then like the mixture of blood and coke falls on the baby.
Oh God.
Like, just he's bad. He's a bad guy, right? And this woman is more or less blameless, right? She can be a little bit annoying, but overall, a morally upstanding human being. So she goes to his sad divorced person apartment in London to drop off a cake and celebrate his birthday with him. She looks amazing. She's dyed her hair blonde. She looks great. And his bookie is there. And his bookie, who heretofore has been like a little bit sinister, but mostly just sort of like, an enabler, like shoots her execution style.
What?
Yes. So this woman finds out that Rishi owns £500,000 to his bookie. The bookie's there and explains this to the wife. And the wife goes off, fair enough, about how this man is bad, right? How he's taking advantage of sick people and he's a terrible person. And these are all things the bookie deserves to hear. And then it's like he can't stand that someone is telling him that he's bad, even though it's just the objective truth. And he execution style shoots her. He pulls out a gun, just shoots her in the head.
What in the world?
So
evidently there's still a bit of the Skins energy there then.
Yeah, that was the one thing where I was like, this is not prestige TV. This is not worthy of what the show has become. And it also feels icky because my theory of what's going to happen is somehow this is going to relate to the plot in season 4, because if this woman is an incredibly famous podcaster, there is no way that one of her podcasting buddies isn't going to do a true crime podcast deep dive into this. She's going to become a podcast.
I have no words to this. But you know what? I will say, Sarah, you've given me a delicious segue into something I think our listeners should know if you haven't already taken part. We have a Patreon.
Is that how she got so rich?
Maybe. Listen, guys, you can visit the link at patreon.com/3he. And I want to tell you, there are a lot of great freebies, fun stuff to win in there if you subscribe. And you can subscribe for as low as $2. It's really great. You get personal conversations with me and Sarah, blog posts. More than anything, though, that I think you'd really be interested in is you get to pick what we discuss in future episodes. You can get credits in some of them, and eventually we will probably have merch. We'll have a whole lot of stuff going on, and the way to find out about it is on our Patreon. So I encourage you, go take a look, just check it out if you're interested. No pressure.
Help us become so rich that if Sadaf marries a guy with a serious gambling addiction, she can pay off his bookie.
Nobody gets shot in this scenario.
No one gets shot.
Please.
Yeah, we don't want anyone to get shot execution style because of their, finance bro husband's gambling activities.
Yes, please God help us. Okay, now one more thing, Sarah, that I would like to quickly discuss. Bit of a subject shift, but I have really been embedded lately in all things Presley, as in Elvis. Okay, I read Priscilla Presley's memoir a couple of months ago. It was fantastic. I highly recommend it to just about anybody. It was really fantastic. Well written. It was just was great, and it gave me a lot of insight into her experience with him and their marriage, which, FYI, not a surprise, was not as
Mm-hmm.
great as it seemed on the outside. She was very young when they got
Mm-hmm.
together. She was about 14, he was in his
Yep.
20s. He infantilized her through their entire relationship. It's fascinating. But long story short, now her daughter Lisa Marie has her biography coming out, and of course she passed, I believe last year, and her daughter Riley Keough. So really going through the generations here. Her daughter Riley has finished the book for her, which I think is just a really touching
Mm-hmm.
and beautiful process. She's written her own sort of opening to it, and the whole thing has just been a family effort. And now Riley's been actively promoting it. She's been dropping details about it, what it digs into, including that her mom grieved her father quite a bit. She would listen to his records while crying on the floor. Riley felt like she never really got over it. And then on top of that, she suggests that Lisa Marie died of a broken heart after Riley's brother took his own life some years ago. It's all very heavy. And I'm really fascinated by how candid Riley is being and how candid Lisa Marie planned to be. She gets into it all in a special with none other than our favorite queen, Oprah. And that special drops on October 8th on CBS and Paramount Plus. Sarah, will you be watching? Will you be reading? What do you make of this family?
So we'll definitely be watching and probably reading. It's interesting. I mean, everything that I find out about this family is so upsetting. I loved
Yeah.
Priscilla. I thought that that should have been nominated for Best Picture. I thought that Sofia Coppola did a beautiful job of introducing us to the less savory side of that story, but also really humanizing Priscilla's parents and showing how powerless they were, right? Like,
Yes.
imagine if, I mean, Harry Styles. I'm not saying Harry Styles would ever date a 14-year-old, but imagine if he showed up and was interested in your 14-year-old. As a parent, it's really hard to tell your kid to stay away from somebody that everybody is obsessed with.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm excited. I also find that I can only digest so much of this content in one go because it's
Mm.
so upsetting. I think that even Priscilla herself, when you read her memoir, doesn't fully understand that what happened to her was sexual abuse. And that really is hard to be exposed to, right? Like the fact that this woman has still, I don't think, completely healed. Uh, what are your what are your thoughts? Are you worried about any of the content that's going to come out here?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, that's an interesting point too, Sarah. You know what I found fascinating in Priscilla's memoir and the actual book? She does seem to, I mean, she beats around the bush a little bit, but she does seem to see that it was sexual abuse, that she was taken advantage of, that she lost her youth to this man in his
Hmm.
life. She touches on it quite a bit, which is why I was so surprised and why I ended up just loving that book. But what's really interesting is in the interviews that she did around that book's release, and then when Sophia did the movie, she always kind of quickly follows it up with, but Elvis was amazing, but I loved him, but he was a great
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
And I think that that's part of what her parents felt, that you were just touching on, this obligation not to ruin his memory. And I think
Hmm.
that's the fascinating thing. This man is still uplifted as this incredible icon. And listen, he was iconic in music, but there was a whole other underbelly to who he was in his personal life. And I think it really was surrounding these women for a long time. His daughter, too, who unfortunately didn't also get to have a relationship with him. He passed when she was quite young, but I think his iconicism and his legendary status haunted them for quite a bit of time. And so I'm fascinated by how she digs into that. But yes, I do worry about how he's going to be represented in this book, and also how any of this is going to be discussed. She also touches on her relationship with Michael Jackson, which I'm a little bit like side eyeing. How's that going to come through? Again, it's a biography, it's this woman's opinion, and her daughter's filling in the blanks the best she can. I think whichever way it goes, I need to read it ASAP.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And I guess I should say that you're right that Priscilla does talk about the abuse, the sexual abuse in the memoir. I guess the reason why to me it felt like she didn't really fully process that it was sexual abuse is because she does also make excuses for him and talk
Yes.
about, like, she uses the word perverted, like what he taught me wasn't perverted, right? Like she's I feel like maybe she's of two minds. Like part of her
Mm.
understands it was abuse and part of her still loves him and defends him, which shows that the abuse is the effects of the abuse are
Yes.
lingering, right? Like she
Yes.
hasn't fully been able to heal. And that's what's so upsetting. It is interesting, and it's important for people to read that, because the truth is sexual abuse, the effects can linger for decades, right? And people often don't completely heal. So everyone needs to know that and understand that that's why when we talk about sexual abuse as a big issue, it actually is.
Yeah.
But it is also very sad to read somebody who doesn't seem to have fully healed like their writing. But it's real. It's real. It's a memoir.
It's real. And in the Oprah special, Riley takes us to Graceland. So that's really interesting too, because she also recently was involved in an Elvis tribute concert there. It's all come after Lisa Marie's passing. So it's a little bit like we're having a little bit of a renaissance moment, which is really fascinating because most of the family is not here anymore. But Priscilla's still around, Riley's around, and I like the way that they're taking up the mantle a little bit. I think it's really sweet, but it's also bittersweet because there's a lot of sadness and darkness around all of it.
There's a lot of sadness, and the family doesn't always agree with the way.
Yes, my God.
The way they want to. There are a lot of family arguments about how to represent Elvis and his legacy and who he was and what he did, and that's realistic, right? Like
true.
That's any family. It's just
Yeah.
they're famous, right? Any family will have arguments over who a person actually was. That's normal and pretty relatable.
Yeah, definitely. Well, on that note, that's this week's episode. What a fabulous chat, Sarah. Next week we'll get back into our regular episodes, but for now, thank you to our talented editor Evan Wexler, and of course, thank you to all of you listeners. If you have only listened to us just this one time, then I encourage you to subscribe, and you can listen to the Reheat for free on the Seeker app. You can also find the show on the Frequency Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to hear more from me, you can find me at _Sadaf Hassan. Sarah, where can our listeners find you?
Listeners can find me at Twitter at Sarah Sahagian. And if you liked this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe so other listeners can find us too. And if you'd like us to keep growing, we'd love for you to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thereheat, where we've got some goods in store for you, as we mentioned today. Thanks for listening.